Bloodstone is something of an outlier among Activision's James Bond titles, a third-person shooter with an original story. To bring that action blockbuster experience home to players, developer Bizarre Creations emulated the Bond films of the time as closely as they could, and as we'll see, that proves to be both the game's greatest asset and its greatest liability. Let's start with the latter. By sticking so closely to the no-frills, blunt instrument nature of Craig's first few films, the core gameplay is functional, but about as reheated and uninteresting as a 7th-generation game can get. Chest-high walls, super basic gunplay and shooting, smartphone minigame diversions, and not much more than that. It's basically the diet soda version of Splinter Cell Conviction. Like in that game, performing a hand-to-hand takedown earns you a mark and execute, a focus aim, that can immediately one-shot an enemy, but as with the overall gunplay, the mechanic lacks any sort of heft or punch that would make it more visceral. Weapons feel tinny, unsatisfying, and very samey, with no real weight to your shots or their sound effects, and that's extra unfortunate because they're all you have to work with. No gadgets, no non-lethal weaponry outside of one specific section, you don't even get grenades. Despite your enemies having them, add in the fact that there's essentially no enemy variety, and shootouts play out the exact same way from the first encounter to the last. It's average at best and grindingly boring at worst, especially in the last hour or two where the shooting gallery feeling gets dialed up to 11. This is one of those games where you need to play it on the highest difficulty setting for any real challenge, and it does get tough by the end, but it does so with the same tired tropes. Janky one-hit kills, obnoxious environmental hazards, and a veritable flood of brain-dead enemies. There's just not enough mechanical depth to allow for much tactical creativity, and the shooting isn't entertaining enough to fully sustain even the short 5 to 6 hour runtime on offer. Close quarters takedowns are fun, at least, in part thanks to Daniel Craig's stunt double from the films designing them and performing their motion capture. Thankfully, there is some variety thanks to a fair few vehicle sections, and it's here where the game finally kicks it into gear. Pun very much intended. Prior to this, Bizarre Creations was primarily known for their excellent Project Gotham racing series, and that pedigree really comes through in these moments. Satisfying controls, explosive set pieces, and beautiful locales all come together with a level of energy that you just don't get from the rest of the game, so these bits are almost objectively the highlight of the experience. They don't last though, and it's not long before you're inevitably yanked into another stilted cutscene or firefight. Many 007 games have surprisingly gripping narratives and really distinct characters, so it's all the more disappointing that Bloodstone's story is quite flimsy and frustratingly bland. There's no intrigue, no wit, no surges of emotion or tension. Things just sort of happen, and it all just is. The main villain is completely forgettable, his plan is unremarkable, and there are some incomprehensible twists throughout that are more confusing than impressive. Some okay voice work from Daniel Craig himself doesn't help much, though in our opinion, he's never been particularly great in any of these games, and this material isn't doing him any favors. Main Bond girl and title song singer Joss Stone doesn't fare any better, but at least Judi Dench is here and reliable as ever, despite also working with less than compelling dialogue. At least it looks pretty good. Even outside of the driving segments, the presentation is generally strong and dynamic throughout, with a nice sampling of vistas. From warm, picturesque Athens to cold, brutalist Siberia and rainy, neon-drenched Thailand. For the most part, it's every bit the exotic, globe-trotting romp you'd expect from a Bond adventure like this. Not everything is impressive. The character models are pretty janky looking, for example, and there's one too many bland shooting galleries in what should be visually striking locations, but on the whole, it's good. And very, very explosive. God, so many things explode. Music is pretty solid too. A very good pastiche of David Arnold's scores from this era of the film series. It's not super memorable by itself, but it's bombastic and additive in appropriate amounts, and if any moments in this milquetoast narrative have any punch at all, it's likely because of the music. On a side note, this particular version is a pretty glaring example of the PC version of a game getting the short end of the stick. Most notably, on-screen button prompts don't change if you plug in a controller, so you basically have to stumble along and figure out how it all works for yourself. This is particularly annoying in segments like QuickTime Event Camera Disabling, where you need to remember what corresponds to what on the fly, or just use a mouse and keyboard, honestly. And that's kind of where we land with Bloodstone. It's a strong translation of Craig's films, but it's kind of too generic and uninteresting for its own good. It's well documented by now that the Bond license holders were notoriously strict and difficult for game devs to work with. That likely factored in here to some degree, but we still need to judge games like these based on what you actually play. It's clear what Bizarre were going for here, and with some more narrative intrigue and gameplay depth, any gameplay depth honestly, it really could have gotten there. The presentation largely worked and the driving sections are awesome, but occasional 5-minute flashes of greatness do not a great game make. Bloodstone was released for Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and PC, and its legacy is an interesting one. Bizarrely, Activision launched it on the same day as their GoldenEye remake for Wii, so it was overshadowed from day one and ultimately didn't sell very well. It was delisted from online stores just a few years later, and it lacks backward compatibility on consoles due to it being a third-party licensed title, so it faded into the background quickly and has stayed there ever since. It's not a bad time though, so tough as the task might be, it's worth tracking down if you're interested in what's become kind of an obscure footnote in Bond's digital history. So when you put it all together, Bloodstone gets 3 Gloobies out of 5. There's impressive set pieces, environment design, and music, but when the gameplay and story are so underwhelming, that all only gets you so far. Thanks so much for watching. Stay fresh, cheese bags. We'll catch you back here real soon.